put it together. But one of the reasons why I decided to do this one is because it demonstrates the let's see, the smudge, mixing the smudge tool with the blur tool and some layering options as well. But then also selecting in more unconventional ways by using your channels. After this one, I want to show you how we're going to kind of put all this stuff together to Photoshop and color correct our shoes. So what I'm going to do first is, let me show you what we're going for. We're actually going for this kind of horrific sort of shark attack image. So our final our piece here, obviously there's no shark. This is kind of more peaceful, but we're gonna kind of take this and give it sort of a different meaning here. So what I'm gonna do is start with my shark image. I'm unlocking the background again by double-clicking it. I'm in RGB mode here, so I'm just gonna quick switch it out to CMYK. There was really no change there visually as far as the color tone. So I'm just going to jump back here to the snorkeler image. Going to do again, go to image mode, CMYK. I'm just going to again go to adjustments, tweak some of the levels a little bit. Typically I like to pull the sliders to where at least there's a little bit, they're at like the edge of like this crest here, just to improve it. So and you can really see like a very subtle difference, but it kind of makes a lot of difference to my eye. So making the darks darker and then the brights a little brighter for some contrast. And so that helps the image a bit. One of the other things I need to do, I'm jumping back to the shark now, is go up to image and size. I want to see how large this is. So we're at almost 9. Turn off my resample. Bring my resolution to 300, so it's about a 2-inch wide piece. Going back to my snorkeler image, image size menu. I'm going to bring my resolution to 300. Didn't have to resample my image at all, so that's good. I think then the shark or the shark piece should actually be pretty decently large here. It's pretty good scale if this guy was kind of in the distance. So obviously I probably will want to make this a little bit more believable by tilting him a bit so I'm looking at the plane that the water is angling at. So I'm transforming this image and just kind of rotating it that way. Then I'm going to hit return. One thing I need to do is look at the tone, looking at the tone of the water. Well, right off the bat, I know I'm going to have to cut this shark out. So this is one of those where I can just take kind of this lasso tool and then really rely on my feathering to really kind of make the cut look a little bit more believable. You can see we've got some sort of this overlay over the leg, and that'll be fixed here with my pen tool. So I'm going to then go to select, and I'm going to go to modify and feather, and I'm going to switch out the pixels to be, let's think here, I'll start with 5 and see what happens there. So I'm feathering at 5. I'm going to select inverse again, delete it, see how blended it is, not so much. I'm going to actually take a couple steps back. Once I hit undo, I going back to my marching ants, but I need to go back more than one step. So I'm going to have to open my history palette here. And this is going to help you go back as many steps, well, a lot of steps, not all of the steps that you've taken since the beginning, but it'll take you either right back to the beginning by clicking the image thumbnail up top, or several steps back. So I'm going to probably go back here to this lasso when I last lassoed this piece, and I'm going to actually refeather it so you can see my feather step here. I'm going to refeather it by again going to select, modify, and feather. And I'm just going to double it and see what happens. And oh, forgot my select inverse piece, so I'll go up to select inverse, delete. This could work. So I'm gonna then, I know I have to cut this, make sure that this leg is able to overlap this shark piece. So I'm going to turn the shark piece off right away. Select my, well, I don't really have to select my background layer, but I'm going to just zoom in on it. So then when I select my pen tool here, I can kind of really refine the trace of the leg. Again, you can probably do your magnetic lasso tool or some other tool like that to kind of cut this. But I'm just going to do it this way with the pen real quick just to demonstrate that method. Sometimes the pen makes it faster. Sometimes I'll use the pen to refine a selection that's not perfect. One thing to note, the pen tool in Photoshop is maybe a little bit different than the one in Illustrator. So if it'll work with these, Bezier curves or however you pronounce that. Otherwise, if you just want to kind of give it a whole change in direction, you can Alt-click the end of this pen tool path, and then kind of give it like a harder turn. So frequently I'll maybe do that just to refine my pen tool. So if you remember Alt-click, that'll help you in some get your angles just the way you want them. So say that were my option for this, I would just do something like that. So again, I'll turn on and off and see, yep, I've cut through the shark layer okay. So I'm just going to finish this up, just arbitrarily circle that piece. Then, so once I close my pen tool path, it's going to create a working path. So under this paths box here, just clicking on that, you can actually then visually see my work path. It kind of gives you this, this preview of it. I'm going to go to this drop down here on the right, and I'm just going to hit Make Selection. So this drop down in the Paths palette, hitting Make Selection, it's going to give me the option to give it a feather radius as well, just like how we feathered that shark layer earlier. I'm going to give it as little feather as possible. I'm going to put 0. And so now you can see that that work path then has made the selection that I've created the path out of. So that selection is still sitting there, it's still valid. Then navigating, closing my paths palette and going back to layers, and then actually turning on the shark layer, selecting the shark layer, which I haven't named shark, but I'll name it there. And then I'm just going to hit my selection tool and then just hit delete. So that's pretty decent. Sometimes you might want to maybe burn this edge if your layers are real close together in this composition that the shark is pretty far back in the background, where in reality would never have a shadow cast from the leg on top of it. So just for future reference, if you need something like a quick shadow on something, try using the burn tool and just brushing that area or maybe even selecting that area and then just brushing it to kind of cast a shadow or something. So with this shark layer then, I need to actually tweak the color. So I think for this one, I would go up to, let me try an adjustment layer and see. So I'm going to layer, and I'm going to do new adjustment layer. And maybe I'll do selective color. I'll hit OK. So I have that new adjustment layer there, although it's not going to really work because it's going to actually change the color of all the layers beneath it. So I'm going to have to do the destructive color editing to that because I didn't take into account my, my background piece. So I'm going to make a duplicate of the shark just so I don't lose like my original, and I'm going to turn that off. So on my shark copy then I'm going to go up to image adjustments and then do the selective color, but in a destructive color editing method. And so I've got to make this water more green. So I'm going to see how I can do that. Definitely going to have to mess around with this a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfect, but what I'm trying to do is get... So taking magenta out of my cyan pixels is helping. Adding cyan's not really working. I think I'm just going to keep this cyan at 0. So it gets it closer. I'm just kind of going to preview on and off. I'm going to try the blues this time. Again, it's kind of sucking out all of the magenta. I don't want to take out too many of the blues because I'm like losing contrast here. So I can see that fish. I need to really kind of keep it at 0 probably. Alright. So again, I'm taking tone out of these different colors that I'm selecting. I need to maybe go into the neutrals. Let's see what's happening there. No, that's not helping. That's alright. I'm going to call it a day on that one, so I'm just going to hit OK. I'm actually going to make another layer of my shark, and I'm going to call it shark fin. Because I'm afraid that if I don't maintain this fin that's coming out of the water here, it's going to blend in too much. And I want it to have that original shark kind of blue rather than this kind of washed out. These edges here kind of need to be kind of original and maintained. So I'm going to, this time I'm just going to do my pen tool again. I'm just going to really quickly, roughly trace out this fin. Yeah, it's pretty rough. But I'll go back into my paths palette, take my drop down to make selection. I'll probably feather it a little bit. I'll try like 1 pixel, 1.5, to see what happens here. It might be too small, but we'll see. And I'll go to image, let's see, select inverse. Get my move tool or move tool again and just delete it. Subtle difference. So then it's a matter of figuring out what these layer modes are going to do for me. So I'm going to hit the shark copy layer. And I'm just going to kind of look into these blending modes to see how I can kind of blend him in to where he's both noticeable but also looks like he's actually submerged in the water a bit. And so again, it's just jumping in here and seeing what kind of effect these layers have. It's all over the place. And yeah, so this layer blending mode is helping this luminosity blending mode. So one thing that's happening is that this layer blending mode could be a little more blended, if you will, around some of these areas. So some of that background maybe needs to come through to make it a little bit more believable. So I'm going to zoom in here, make sure that I have my layer selected, this copy layer, and I'm really just going to kind of old-fashioned erase some of this, but with my eraser tool, with a kind of a much lighter opacity, not as light as 10%, maybe like 25. So just to see little by little how I can bring in that background a bit to kind of merge these images together. I cut that fin out, so that fin is at a layer above what I'm erasing right now, so I can kind of run over it with my eraser tool and not really worry too much about hurting the fin. And I'm just going to come around and kind of brush it around. I don't want to really get too close to this shark because I don't want to erase him. I want him to be as visible as possible. So I'm at 25% and I'm already starting to see like way too much stuff being erased. So I'm going to go like down to 10 back again because I'm getting real close to this shark and I really need to be careful not to. And even then I'll still have to kind of touch him just to get rid of some of this darkness here. So I kind of like have this going. I'm just going to bring this. Oh yeah, you know what? That's all right. The next part of the. I'll save this real quick. So I'll save it. Bear with me here. All right. So the next thing I have to do is kind of try and mimic this whole pool of blood. And so that's kind of where I'm going to go with the, I'm going to use the smudge tool, but I'm also going to use the just a regular old paintbrush and just kind of see what I can do with it. Let's see, so I'm going to make a new layer then, just above the background. And I'll call it Blood 1. So what I want to do is kind of not simply just take my brush and just go over it and just start drawing blood in there. I want to make it believable, so I want to do a couple different layers of color of this, red color. Sort of blur it, sort of smudge it, so it kind of maybe looks like it's sort of wafting through the water, if you will. So I'm going to start with that. So with different sizes of brush here, let me see how this would work. That might work. So I can kind of choose like a tip of a brush here under my brushes palette, and it just goes on and on. There's almost way too many options for me. But either way, you can kind of select your brush. You can adjust the size of it. I'm going to change the color to red here, just because that's like where I'm going with it. So here's a sample of that, a smaller brush. It's pretty hard-edged, so I can, actually that's just the nature of the brush. So it's just a hard-edged brush. I can increase or decrease the size of it. just up here in my menu. So I'll make it larger. And I'm just going to kind of, well, I think it needs to be a little darker actually. So let me go back and change my color. There. It's probably a little more believable. So I'm just going to kind of arbitrarily brush some of this like that. And then I'm going to get my kind of this regular airbrush looking brush here, and then have reduce the hardness of it so it's got more of like a blur to it as well. And then I'm going to just kind of mess with the opacity. You know, I'm just messing around. I'll make a new layer and just kind of put it in there and sort of just see what happens. So there's like a subtle layer of that. Let's see, there's going to be another 75%, another layer of that. Yeah, nothing too serious, you know. So what I really want to do next is maybe I'll make another layer of this original blood piece, and I want to actually maybe start blurring that layer. So I'll go filter a blur, and I'll do a Gaussian blur on that again, and just make it super blurry. And this layer, this already blurred layer, I'm going to turn the opacity down here in my layers palette, so it's just ever so subtle, so it's almost like the smoke cloud of blood in the water. So as I layer the things over and over again, my goal here is to just sort of help make this a little bit more believable. My next thing I think I'm going to do is take this blood layer, this middle one, this real solid one that I have, and then I'm going to take my smudge tool. And so that's over here. I'm going to grab that, and I'm going to increase the brush size. And so our option here is we have strength. We can sample all the layers when smudging. I'm just going to try and do the one that I have here. So I'm just going to kind of pull it one way or the other, just so it looks like, kind of the goal here is just to make it look like it's running through the water. And so I can pull it and I can kind of move it around like that as I'm pulling it. And then I can increase the strength just to kind of extend the pull, if you will, that I have with it. Okay. I think increasing and decreasing the the brush size helps too, just kind of arbitrarily. Now I'm going to start doing the same thing to that really faded out layer. I'll maybe even just increase the opacity a little bit to darken it up like 10%. And then I'll try my smudge again. In the hopes that it can give it maybe some depth, a little more depth than it might already have. All right. So then I'm just going to jump and kind of experiment with my layer blending modes. I want to see with my real solid blend layer, kind of see what I can use that's going to actually bring out some of that background, if at all possible. sure it's helping me too much. Turn those off. Let's see. That was. This I think was close. Nope. I feel like it's too vivid. Let's see. I think that's probably the closest I'll get. Alright, so what I want to do, I'm going to actually select this. So I'm going to select all on the canvas. With this layer selected, I'm going to nudge it side to side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this layer. I'm going to fill the that layer. I want to choose color. And I think I'm going to try and I'll just go darken it up and see what happens. No, not too much. Let me try again. Fill. Oh, it's way off. I guess that's what it's going to be. I'll go back a couple steps then. Yeah, it was probably better that way. So I need to then take these legs. Let me turn this layer on and just kind of fade it back a little bit. I need to actually take the eraser tool to it as well so I can still see some of this more solid area. So I'll take the eraser tool and I'm going to start. It's not selecting. Where is it? Yeah, I'm going to start trying to bring out some of that other layer that was more defined in the waves. So then I will hit this background layer and I'm going to select channels here. And under channels, I can see these thumbnails of these black and white layers. So what it's really showing you here is that when I click on cyan, these are all the cyan pixels in the image. And it's just showing the cyan pixels as black and the other pixel or the other colors as white. Again, with the magenta, same idea. So in this pool of blood, it's mostly magenta, obviously. So that's where most of my magenta pixels are at. Yellow, we had the yellow flippers, so that's kind of where that focus is. And black, of course. So with this yellow channel selected, most of the yellow pixels are in the legs, so that's where most of the contrast is in these for the legs piece. Because what I want to do is just focus on the legs and select those. So with the yellow channel selected, I can go down here and hit this load channel as selection option. So that, by selecting it, is selecting all of the yellow pixels on the image. So then what I can do is I can hit the CMYK again to see my original image. and actually improve my make a selection just based on the yellow channel pixels. So if you have an image that has a lot of one color over the other, a lot of contrast, you can quickly select different objects just depending on the contrast uh, with that menu option. Of course, it's not perfect, you know, but that could help you start to refine a selection. So in this area here, what I want to do is then take my pen tool, and then I want to trace this this piece of the leg. And then bridge it over here. So if I have these legs selected, what I want to do is actually add to this selection that I have with this little piece here. So again, with the pen tool, I'd go to Paths, and I go to Make Selection, and my drop down. Keep it at like 0.5 pixels, and then hit OK. Oop, I forgot a step. I'll go back here. So again, Paths, Make Selection, and then here, this is the part I forgot. You have the option to do a new selection, which is typically what I've been doing this whole time pretty much. Add to the selection that you currently have existing, subtract from the current existing selection, or otherwise intersect. So I'm pretty sure it's add, so I'm going to try and add and see. Yeah, so that looks about right. So that's fine. So now I'm just going to actually delete this leftover overlay blood stuff. Oop. Actually, I don't want to do that. What I want to do is inverse this selection. And what I actually also want to do is take my pen tool and refine this a little bit more. Make a selection. Add is not the one I want to subtract. Oops, cancel. So I'll subtract it this time since I have my inverse of the original. I'll do the same, subtract on this side. Because my goal here is to separate the foreground legs from the background piece of the water. And then I'm just going to, so then I can just target this this stuff here. On that first and then the second piece. Oh. Too many deletes. There we go. All right. And let's see. I'll just quick magnetic lasso this piece. Oh. And I can actually hold the shift key and I'll magnetic lasso this side so I don't have to delete and then restart again. Not exactly what I wanted. So with that selected, I'm just going to refine it by taking my eraser tool again, so I can use that hard edge to just kind of help me get to where I want to go. It's not perfect, but it's definitely not perfect, but it needs, it's closer to where I want it to be. And I could probably with this, you know, like make another duplicate of this blood layer. Actually bring it back to normal, bring it really kind of light, maybe multiply it or something. And then just blur it again. So it kind of expands a little bit of the darkness of the water and stuff.